Are there any questions?
So are we going to have to maneuver, I presume, in our next budget? To compensate, or are we going to have to, I mean, things are going to probably be different, much different in the next.
Yeah, I mean, I think, I mean, you know, it's a game changer with the whole COVID and the school closures. So, you know, once again, one of the things that you'll see on the budget amendment is coming up is that we've already taken out $800,000 of PD. So I'm assuming that on the Prop R, we're probably not going to hit the PD area that we initially targeted back in 2015. And then once again, the buses every year are going to be different because every single year now we're trying to buy 5 or 6 buses. So every year we're going to be below that initial target. But you know, when you set a target in 2015, things do change. Your needs and facts and circumstances all change, and you have to adapt reasonably. So I think these are reasonable adaptations to the initial Prop R plan.
I think so too. I mean, everything's so unsure that it's just difficult to predict. I mean, I hope that we come to a point where it gets back to normal, but in the meantime, I realize that we have to stay in flux more or less to accommodate all these changes. Thank you.
If I could point out one thing, there was, that bus schedule you talk about was presented with Prop R. So that from the very beginning was always known that we were going to start out with that big influx of buses right off the bat and then go to 5 or 6 as those, I forget, 15 years, I think,
That
was about the time frame.
Right.
Yeah, so that's not actually something that is even new. That was introduced right with the original prop.
That's right. Yeah, and if we had bought, if we had spent the initial, if we had not had COVID and we had spent the planned PD amount and the textbook amount, we would be right near the targeted item, tracking item.
Yeah, I can honestly say we weren't forecasting a pandemic in 2015. Peggy, Tori, do you guys have any questions?
No, I do not. Thank you.
No problem. Anyone else? Thanks, Marshall. Next up is budget amendment. Is that you as well? All right.
Back up. All right. So for the budget amendment, basically, we prepared the budget last spring. We talked about COVID. It was prepared with great uncertainty because we had a 45-day closure at the end of the year. And so, out of default, we prepared the fiscal year 21 budget, assuming a normal year, knowing that it probably wasn't going to be a normal year. And it's not a normal year. So that's driven many adjustments. If the blended schedule that we were currently operating under would have continued, which we know as of today is not going to be precisely the same, the students coming to class would be in class about 30 to 36% of the full school year, depending if you're elementary school or high school. The buildings would be open probably 60 to 71% of the time of the normal school year. So all of those drive impacts to revenues and expense projections. In other words, individual students coming through the buildings would, for example, impact water use. You have a blended schedule and you only have half the students showing up, they're only using half the water. But your buildings are still open, whether you have half the students or all of the students. So that impacts electricity. You're still going to heat the building to the same temperature. So you have to really dissect all of the revenues and expenses to understand what the impact is of the world we live in today, and then try to calculate your adjustments accordingly. So that's what I've attempted to do. In my budget write-up, in my budget amendment write-up on the agenda sheet, it said that blended model will likely change Well, it already has up to date. It's changed. So there'll be budget adjustments going forward. But when we look at where we're at today, we've got schedules net together with a $1.3 million net gain, but the operating fund swing is much larger than that. The operating fund started off the year with a budgeted $4.5 million loss. Now it's going to sit at a $2.4 million loss according to these schedules, which is a reduction of $2.1 million. And it's primarily due to $900,000 of CARES relief money that's not tied to expenses, because some of the CARES relief money does tie to expenses and they offset each other. $800,000 of PD that's reduced that we talked about, and then a reduction of electricity and gasoline of $375,000. That makes up the $2.1 million primarily. That pushes our cash reserve from a projected 30.1% previously to 33% now, which compares to last year's ending balance of 36.2%. The non-operating loss was initially budgeted at $1.5 million. That pushes up to $2.3 million, and the big impact, the big factor driving that is food service. Food services revenue right now is projected to be down $1.9 million, and the food expense to be down $900,000. We've got a net $1 million loss. And those are still rough projections that have changed quite a bit. So when we look at the schedule, the revenue schedule, look down below at the bottom half. See all the way down at the bottom, our revenue I've got decreasing $2.8 million. And then the summary of key adjustments, I show the CARES program, additional revenue of $1,130,000, but 900 of that is free and clear. The remaining portion of that ties into expenses where we're increasing expenses and it's offset by the CARES money. The food service shows the $1.9 million reduction of revenue, which is just, it's our best estimate right now. And on the expense sheet, you'll see where that's offset by reduced food costs. Student activity revenue is way down. That's offset mostly by expense reductions as well, so that sort of nets out. Homeless transportation, the same thing. There's a net. A lot of that is offset on the expense side as well. Community service, we're not doing as much community service, not as much revenue, but it's offset on the expense side also, where expenses go down. So ultimately, our total adjusted budget now is just under $116 million. When we get into the expenses, at the bottom, you'll see total expense reduction was a decline of almost $4.1 million. And when we look at the key adjustments there in that bottom right-hand box, there's a lot of salary expense related to the professional development, the community ed, the student activities. We also had professional development services, some of the food service we talked about, the student activities we talked about. We mentioned the energy, which is the gasoline and electricity primarily, and we talked about the homeless transportation. So in the end, you come down to your reduction of $4.1 million. You'll see down at the bottom summary there, revenue going down $2.8 million, expense going down 4.1. It nets out to a $1.3 million gain. So what does that do to our cash flow statement? You can see on the cash flow now, really on that second tier of boxes, over on the right side, there's a net gain. It's a small print. There's a net gain loss in the operating bucket. The operating net loss now is $2,438,000. That before is $4.5 million. Now it's $2.4 million. And then when we look at, if you'll note, down in that third tier of boxes, the food service fund 500, the projected ending balance of food service, and we talked about the $1 million loss, it's a rough estimate, that puts the food service fund at a negative $617,000 balance at the end of the year. So that's just something we're going to have to monitor. We'll have to see if there's any state or federal relief that comes our way to help pay for schools' food service programs. But if there's not, on a worst-case basis, we'll have to be considering what kind of money we're going to move from the general fund into the food service. If we move $1 million, obviously that's going to impact the cash reserve. So that's just something we'll have to monitor. That could be an additional hit to the general fund. And then down below here on this page, on this part, it just shows the cash reserve percentage, the updated projection on the fiscal year 21 cash reserve is 33.0% compared to last year's 36.2%. So all in all, for all of the road that we're traveling, it's not a huge reduction. It's be a lot worse, but we're still working off estimates, and there will be more budget adjustments coming down the road. We'll just have to see. So with that, open up to questions and then ask for approval of the budget amendment.
Anyone have any questions? Could I get a motion to approve the budget adjustment?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
All opposed?
Aye.
Motion passes. Thanks, Marshall. Okay, we're to the part for open period for patron comments. And we have two. And Faith Burchett is our first speaker. Hi, Faith. Just let you know you have 3 minutes to tell us what it is you want to tell us.
Hello, I am a junior at Oakville High School. I'm pretty nervous, but I really wanted to speak for while sitting in my chemistry class today, I heard that we're going to go back virtually, like full virtual learning. I believe that the majority of students want to feel as if they will succeed in life. And this starts with a strong education. In virtual learning, kids sort of lose that education. It's very scary. I feel lost. I feel as if I'm losing my high productivity level. I also think education should be taught in person and not on a screen. Thank you.
Thank you, Faith. Deanna McKelvey. I know you know everything, and because you're with the MNEA, you get 5 minutes.
Oh, thank you. My name is Dina McKelvey, and I am president of Mehlville NEA. And first, I want to wish a happy belated Veterans Day to all the dedicated men and women who have served to ensure our safety. I also want to thank the board, as always, for your selfless service to our community. I also want to let you know that the Mehlville NEA teachers have partnered with CARE STL Health to host a free coronavirus testing event in our community on Saturday, November 14th from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Peace Lutheran. Mehlville School District and our neighboring districts are fixtures in our community and are instrumental in preserving the traditions and values we hold dear. I have friends in almost every district in St. Louis County and St. Louis City. We all live for our school, and we all live for our students, and which is what makes our current situation so much harder and so much more personal. What makes a school a place we as parents want to send our students and our kids is the people. It's the bus driver who first greets a child in the morning, because for our students, the school day starts when they step foot onto that school bus. It's the cafeteria worker who offers a warm meal with an equally warm smile. It's the custodian who, in addition to keeping our schools clean and welcoming, helped hang student artwork and set up for the basketball game. It's the principal who knows every single student's name. It's the administrative assistant who helps with everything because, let's face it, they're the ones who run the school. It's the nurse who makes a sick kid or staff member feel better while we're at school. And it's the teachers. It's our early education professionals, our classroom teachers, specialists, elective teachers, coaches, sponsors, mentors, and counselors. The list goes on. COVID-19 numbers have gone up, and our hospitals are almost at capacity. We are in the red zone when it comes to the dangers of this pandemic. What I have learned about COVID-19 is that we can't predict how it will affect each individual that becomes infected. Sometimes a person experiences flu-like symptoms, and sometimes no symptoms at all. Sometimes a person is hospitalized because their symptoms are so severe. Sometimes an infected person has residual health complications long after their initial infection with no known end in sight. And sometimes a person will die from COVID-19. We agree that the best place for our students to learn is in person and in the classroom. We agree our students have been missing out since the conclusion of the school day on March 13th, 2020. Unfortunately, the cost of an in-person instruction may outweigh the benefit. One of our neighboring districts has already had to pay that price. A child has died from COVID. Tonight, you may have seen Mehlville educators standing up for the health and safety of our students and staff. These brave educators have always and will always put student safety first. They want to prevent that tragedy from happening here. Generations of students will miss out if a teacher dies, if a teacher retires early because of lingering health issues, or leaves teaching altogether because he or she feels overextended and underappreciated. This virus is spreading in our community and in our neighboring communities. We are part of this community, and we must stop the spread. The World Health Organization recommends not opening schools for in-person learning until there is less than a 5% infection rate. Our infection rate currently stands at just under 20%. As I mentioned before, in order to be part of the solution in our community, Mehlville NEA teachers have partnered with CARE STL Health to host a free coronavirus testing event in our community on Saturday, November 14th, from 10 a.m. to 2 p.m. at Peace Lutheran, located at 737 Barracks View Road, St. Louis, Missouri, 63125. We are offering free COVID tests to our students, our staff, and community members. We invite you as a board and board members to come and get tested on Saturday to help stop the spread. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay. Next up is our authorization to go into closed session.
Motion to enter into a closed session meeting for the purposes of discussing the lease, purchase, or sale of real estate and individually identifiable personal records, performance ratings, or records pertaining to employees or applications for employment.
Can I get a second?
Second.
Okay, this one's a roll call, so unfortunately, Peggy and Tori, we can't see. So we'll start Larry.
Yes.
Jean?
Yes.
Me, yes. Lisa?
Yes.
Jeff?
Yes.
Motion passes. Okay, we are in closed session. Oh, and I also forgot to mention, Tori and Peggy, you guys probably want to get back. I've got 2 new cabinet members here up in the front in your places, so they're doing a pretty good job. Not to rub it in. Have a good night.